My family used me as an ATM for 23 years and excluded me from the $52,000 trip I paid for. Now they're crying at my door. But I slammed it in their faces and I don't regret it. I'm 28 years old. I work in corporate consulting, making more money than I ever imagined when I was a kid. And last week, my parents showed up at my apartment door crying and begging me to forgive them. I closed the door in their faces. And before you think I'm a horrible daughter, let me tell you the whole story. Because what they did to me for over 20 years basically turned me into the personal ATM of a family that never saw me as anything more than a second-class employee. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was 5 years old and Emily was born, my parents had told me I was going to have a little sister and I was excited. You know, I'd been asking for a sibling for years. But what I didn't know was that the day Emily came into the world was basically the day I stopped existing to my parents. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, literally overnight I went from being their daughter to being like an unpaid nanny. My mom stopped reading me bedtime stories because she was too tired from taking care of Emily. My dad stopped taking me to the park on Sundays because Emily was too little to go. And when I tried to get their attention, it was always, "Wait, Sarah. Your sister needs this." Or, "Sarah, be more understanding. Emily is just a baby." The first few years weren't so terrible. I guess it was weird, feeling like I wasn't as important anymore. But I thought it was normal, that this was how families worked when a new baby arrived. But as Emily got older, things got worse. Much worse. When Emily was like 3 and I was 8, my parents enrolled her in gymnastics classes. I don't know exactly when it became a total obsession for them, but suddenly our entire family life revolved around Emily's training schedule. Weekends weren't for doing family things. They were for going to Emily's competitions. Vacations were planned according to Emily's gymnastics calendar. And when I say everything was about her, I mean everything. I remember perfectly when I was 11, 2 years old, and there was a school field trip to the Science Museum in the capital. It was something I'd been looking forward to for months because we were going to stay for 2 days, and it was the first time I was going to travel without my parents. I'd saved money from helping neighbors with their yards to buy things at the gift shop. I'd packed my backpack like 3 weeks early. I was super excited. 2 days before the trip, my mom told me I wasn't going to be able to go because Emily had an important gymnastics competition that same weekend, and they needed me to stay home to help. When I told them it wasn't fair, that I'd been planning this for months, my dad told me, "Sarah, your sister needs you. Stop being so selfish." I stayed home that weekend, watching bags and recording videos while Emily did her routines, and I cried so much that night my head hurt. That was just the beginning of a pattern that lasted years. Emily always had priority over anything I wanted or needed. When I turned 15, my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I told them I'd like a laptop for school because I had to do all my work at the library because our family computer was always being used. You know what they gave me? A birthday card with $20 inside. 2 months later, Emily turned 10, and my parents threw her a massive party with a professional gymnastics instructor who came to give a private class, plus a custom cake that cost like $200, plus a bunch of new brand name clothes. The difference was so obvious that even the neighbors started noticing. But nobody said anything because, you know, not your family, not your problem. The moment that really changed everything was when Emily was 13. There was a super important state gymnastics competition. It was on a Saturday afternoon. I was 18 at the time, and in my senior year of high school, I worked weekends at a coffee shop to save money for college because I already knew my parents weren't going to help me. That Saturday, I had the opening shift. So I left the house at 5 in the morning and didn't get back until 3 in the afternoon. When I got home, my mom was hysterical, crying and screaming, and my dad saw me come in and yelled at me that because of me, Emily had ruined her gymnastics career. Turns out Emily had fallen during her routine and broken her wrist, and somehow this was my fault because I wasn't there to give her encouragement before her performance. I swear I'm not making this up. My father literally told me, if you'd been here supporting your sister instead of wasting time at that coffee shop, she wouldn't have gotten so nervous and this wouldn't have happened. Emily had to quit gymnastics for several months and eventually never returned to the competitive level she'd had before. And for years, my parents blamed me for that. At family dinners, when Emily complained about something, my mom would say things like, "Well, your sister ruined your gymnastics dreams, so don't expect much from her." It was like living in an alternate reality where I was the villain of a story that didn't even make sense. When it came time to apply to colleges, I had good grades, like a 3.7 gigapascals. I'd been part of the debate club. I'd worked part-time for 3 years. I had a pretty solid personal essay. I applied to a state university that was about 3 hours from home, nothing fancy, but it was a decent school with a good business program. When I got accepted, I was so happy. I thought I was finally going to be able to get out of that house and start my own life. I showed the acceptance letter to my mom, and she barely looked at it, just said, "Oh, that's nice, Sarah," and kept making dinner. I asked her if we could sit down and talk about how we were going to handle tuition costs, and she looked at me like I was asking her for $1 million. My dad came home that night, and when I brought up college, he basically told me that they didn't have money to pay for my education, that I was old enough to get a job at the mall or something and pay for my own studies. I told him I'd researched it, and between tuition, books, room and board, it was going to cost like $15,000 the first year. There was no way I could pay for that working part-time at a store. My dad shrugged and said, "Well, Sarah, then maybe you should reconsider whether college is really necessary. Lots of people have successful lives without a degree." Emily, who was 13 at the time, was sitting there listening to everything and said something like, "Sarah's not that smart anyway. She probably wouldn't do well in college." And my parents said nothing to correct her. I was devastated. I literally felt like the floor was opening up beneath me. I'd worked so hard for years. I'd maintained good grades while working and basically raising Emily when my parents were busy, and now they were telling me to figure it out on my own. That night, I called my best friend Grace crying, told her everything, and she told me to come to her house the next day because her parents wanted to talk to me. Grace and I had been best friends since we were 7. Her parents owned a bakery in downtown and had always treated me better than my own family, honestly. When I got to her house the next day, Michael and Rebecca, Grace's parents, sat me down in the kitchen, and Michael said, "Sarah, Grace told us what happened with your family and college. Rebecca and I have been talking, and we want to make you an offer." They explained that they needed help at the bakery, especially with the catering business they were trying to expand, and that if I agreed to work for them part-time during my 4 years of college managing orders and deliveries on weekends, they would pay my full tuition. I told them I couldn't accept something like that it was too much. But Michael told me, "It's not charity, Sarah. It's an investment in someone we believe in. And, besides, we really need the help." Rebecca added, "You've been like a second daughter to us for years. Let us do this for you." I cried so much that day, I probably got dehydrated. I accepted their offer, and in August of that year, I moved to college. My parents barely reacted when I told them I was leaving. My mom just said, "Well, I guess you found a way to make it work." Emily didn't even say goodbye to me the day I left. I drove to campus with Grace and her parents. They helped me move into the dorm. Rebecca cried when they left. She hugged me super tight and told me to call them if I needed anything. That was the first time in years I felt like someone really cared about me. The college was amazing. Honestly. I majored in business administration, maintained a 3.9 gigapascals, and on weekends, I drove back to town to work at the bakery. At first, I just took orders and made deliveries, but after a few months, Michael gave me more responsibilities. He let me handle the entire catering side, from quotes to event coordination. I discovered I was really good at it, at organizing things, dealing with clients, making everything flow smoothly. By my second year, I'd expanded the catering business so much that Michael and Rebecca had to hire 2 more people. I was proud of myself for the first time in my life. During those years, I barely talked to my parents. I'd call them maybe once a month, and the conversations lasted like 5 minutes. They never asked me how I was doing in school or what I was studying. They only talked about Emily. Emily's on the swim team now. Emily has a new boyfriend. Emily this, Emily that. I honestly stopped listening after a while. I didn't go home during the summers. Instead, I stayed near campus, working full-time at the bakery and saving every penny I could. By my 3rd year, I'd saved enough money to pay Michael and Rebecca back for everything they'd invested in my education. When I tried to give them the check, Rebecca literally refused to take it, told me that wasn't the deal, but I insisted so much that they finally accepted it on the condition that they'd put it in a savings account for me in case I ever had an emergency. In my senior year of college, something happened that really opened my eyes about how bad the situation with my family was. It was December, and I went home for Christmas because Grace convinced me I should try to spend time with my family, even if just for the holidays. When I arrived, I noticed my parents had renovated the entire house, like, New furniture in the living room, remodeled kitchen, huge TV on the wall. Emily had a new car in the driveway. A pretty nice 2018 Honda Civic. I asked my mom about the renovations, and she told me very casually, "Oh yeah, we decided it was time to update some things." That night during dinner, Emily was talking about what colleges she wanted to consider for the next year. She mentioned a couple of private schools that cost like $50,000 a year, and my dad just said, "Well, we'll have to see which one has the best program for you." I froze. I said to them, "Wait, you're going to pay for Emily's college?" My mom looked at me like I'd said something offensive and responded, "Well, yes, Sarah. Emily is an excellent student and deserves to go to a good school." I asked, "So why didn't you pay for mine?" And my dad said, "Your situation was different, Sarah. You've always been more independent. We thought you'd find your own way." I yelled at them. "It wasn't that I was more independent. You literally refused to help me and told me to get a job at the mall." My mom got defensive and said, "I don't know why you're being so dramatic. Look, you found a way to go to college. Everything worked out." That's when my dad dropped the bomb. He told me, "Sarah, if you really want to know, your mother and I have been saving for Emily's education since she was born. We've been very careful with our finances to make sure she has all the opportunities she deserves." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I said to them, "Wait, are you telling me that during all those years when I was begging for help with college, you had money saved but decided not to use it on me?" My mom said, "It wasn't enough for both of you. We had to make a decision." I asked them, "And how did you decide Emily deserved that money and I didn't?" My dad basically said, "Emily has always been more dedicated, more focused, she has more potential." I got up from the table and left the house that same night. I didn't even stay until Christmas. I graduated in May with honors and multiple job offers. I accepted a position at a corporate consulting firm in the city, like 2 hours from my town. The starting salary was $65,000 a year, which for me was a fortune. The job offer came after one of the bakery's corporate clients, a man named Mr. Anderson, who was CEO of a mid-sized company, saw me handle a super complicated catering event for his company. "I was so impressed by your Nanterre professionalism," he told me afterwards, and asked if I'd ever considered a career in business consulting. He gave me his card and told me to contact him when I was about to graduate. I did. I had 3 interviews, and they offered me the job. My parents didn't come to my graduation. My mom said Emily had an important swim meet that day and they couldn't miss it. Grace and her parents went. Michael took like 1,000 pictures of me. Rebecca cried again. It was perfect. After the ceremony, I showed them my job offer, and Michael hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. He told me, "We always knew you were going to do incredible things, Sarah." That was the family I chose, the one that chose me back. I moved to the city in June, found a small but nice apartment, started my job, and honestly, I was living my best life. During the first few months, my parents didn't contact me at all. I didn't contact them either. It was liberating, not having to hear about how wonderful Emily was every time. I talked to them. But then, like in October, I got a call from my mom. She told me they needed to talk to me about something important and asked if I could come visit them that weekend. I told them I was busy with work, which was true, but also I had no desire to see them. My mom insisted, said it was urgent, so I finally agreed. When I got to the house, my parents sat me down in the living room and my dad started with, "Sarah, we know we've had our differences, but you're still our daughter, and we hope you can help your family." My mom then explained that they'd had some unexpected expenses, house repairs, Emily's car needed maintenance, plus her college costs were higher than they expected, and basically they were having trouble making ends meet. I sat there, staring at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. My dad said, "We understand you have a good job now, and we thought maybe you could help us with some monthly expenses. Nothing crazy, just what you can." I asked them how much. They were thinking, and my mom said, "Well, if you could give us like $1,000 or $1,500 a month, that would help us a lot." I almost laughed in their faces. I said to them, "Let me see if I understand. For years you ignored me, treated me like a housekeeper, refused to help me with college, made me feel like I was worthless. And now that I have money, you want me to support you?" My dad got defensive and said, "It's not like that, Sarah. We're your family. Families are supposed to support each other." I responded, "Oh, now I'm family. How convenient. Here's where I made probably my biggest mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. I don't know. I was so angry, but also a part of me still wanted their approval, you know? I still wanted to prove to them I was valuable, that they were wrong if they thought I wouldn't amount to anything. So I told them, look, I'm not going to give you cash every month, but I can set up a credit card connected to my account that you can use for necessary expenses, with a limit of $1,500 a month. My mom hugged me and said, thank you, Sarah. I knew we could count on you. My dad just nodded and said, this is the right thing to do. I set up the card the following week and mailed it to them. The first few months, I checked the statements and saw normal things. Groceries, gas, some utility bills. I thought, okay, they're really using it for basic needs. This is fine. But honestly, with my job being so demanding and my whole new life in the city, I started paying less attention to the statements. I just paid the balance each month and moved on. Fast forward like a year and a half. I was 26 at the time. I'd received 2 promotions at work. I was making like $90,000 a year. I had a bigger apartment. I was dating someone. My life was good. Emily had finished her 2nd year of college. Apparently everything was going well for her too. One day I was reviewing my bank statements because I was considering buying a new car and wanted to see exactly how much I was spending each month. When I got to the statement for the credit card my parents were using, I noticed the balance that month was much higher than normal, like $4,000. I started reviewing the transactions and almost fell out of my chair. There was a $2,000 charge for a hotel, multiple charges from fancy restaurants, a $1,200 charge at a clothing boutique, plane tickets, car rental. I thought, okay, maybe there was an emergency. Maybe someone had to travel for something medical. I texted my parents asking about the charges, and my mom responded, oh yeah, we forgot to mention. Emily got engaged and we're planning her wedding. We needed some expenses for meetings with her future husband and his family. They hadn't told me anything about Emily being engaged. I didn't even know she had a serious boyfriend. I called my mom immediately and told her the card was for necessary expenses, not for planning. Weddings, she told me. Sarah, don't be dramatic. It's just 1 month. We'll keep it under control. I told her I was going to have to reduce the card limit because this was out of control. My mom got angry and told me I was being selfish, that Emily was going through a very exciting time in her life and I was ruining it with my stinginess. That conversation ended with her hanging up on me. The next month, the balance was $6,000. I called my dad this time and he basically told me to relax. That Emily only gets married once, and if I really cared about my family, I'd want to contribute to her happiness. I told them I was going to cancel the card, and my dad told me, if you do that, don't expect us to invite you to the wedding. I told him I honestly didn't care, and that after years of treating me like trash, the fact that they were now threatening me with not inviting me to a wedding I was probably financing was absolutely ridiculous. My dad told me I was a bitter and selfish person, and hung up. I didn't cancel the card. I don't know why I didn't do it immediately. I guess some stupid part of me still had hope things would get better, that eventually they'd see me as more than just a source of money. The next few months were more of the same. High charges, me complaining, them telling me to stop being so dramatic. By April, I'd paid like $30,000 in expenses that clearly weren't basic needs. I finally received a formal invitation to Emily's wedding, which was going to be in August at a pretty fancy venue like an hour from our town. May came, and that month the charge was $12,000. $12,000. I was shaking with rage when I saw the statement. There were multiple charges from a travel agent, expensive hotels, restaurants, stores. I called my mom and yelled at her, "What the hell is this? Why are there $12,000 of charges on the card this month?" She very calmly told me, "Oh yeah, we were going to tell you. We're planning a family trip to Monaco for Emily's engagement. Her fiancé Tyler has family there, and we want to celebrate appropriately." I swear for a second I thought I was hallucinating. I said to them, "Are you telling me you spent my money to plan a luxury trip to Monaco for the family?" And my mom responded, "Well, yes, Sarah. It's a very special time for Emily and Tyler." I asked her, "Okay, and when is this trip?" She told me they were leaving in 2 weeks and were going to be there for 10 days. I asked her, "Did you invite me too, or am I just financing everyone else's trip?" There was a long pause, and my mom said, "Well, Sarah, the truth is this trip is for immediate family and Tyler's family. We thought you'd be too busy with work to come anyway." Something broke in me at that moment. I said to them, "Let me see if I understand. You spent my money from my job, from my account, to plan a luxury trip to Monaco to celebrate Emily's engagement, and you intentionally didn't invite me because I'm not considered part of the family." My mom tried to backtrack and said, "It's not like that, Sarah. We just thought, well, you know, you have your own life now and we didn't want to bother you." I told her that was the most ridiculous and cruel thing they'd ever done to me, and that's saying something because the bar was already pretty low. My mom sighed and said, "Sarah, you've always been so sensitive. Nobody's excluding you. Things just worked out that way." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolute clarity. I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I was just furious and determined. I sat down at my computer and opened the complete statement for the card since I'd set it up. I started adding everything up, every charge, every month, a year and a half of transactions. The total was $52,000. I'd paid $52,000 in expenses for my family over a year and a half, and not only did they not thank me, but they'd intentionally excluded me from a trip I was financing. I kept looking and found the complete Monaco trip itinerary in the confirmation emails that were linked to the card. First-class flights for my parents, Emily, Tyler, and Tyler's parents. 6 people total. Reservations at the Hotel de Paris Monte Carlo, one of the most expensive hotels in all of Europe. 3 rooms for 10 nights. Reservations for Michelin-starred restaurants, private tours, a yacht rented for a day, casino tickets, basically everything you could imagine on an absolutely ridiculous luxury trip. And then I had an idea. All those reservations were made with my credit card, which meant, technically, I had control over them. I opened each reservation confirmation, found the confirmation numbers, and started making calls. I called the hotel first and explained I needed to cancel the reservations. They told me I'd lose the deposit, but they could cancel. I told them that was fine. I called the airline and canceled all the flights. There was a penalty, but I didn't care. I called the yacht service and canceled. Restaurants, canceled. Tours, canceled. Everything I could find that was booked with that card, I canceled it. Then I called the bank and permanently deactivated the card. I made sure it couldn't be reactivated under any circumstances. And the bank representative asked me if I was sure, and I told him I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. The whole process took me 4 hours, but when I finished, I felt like I'd lifted a giant weight off my shoulders. Then I sent a single text message to my mom that said, "I've canceled all the Monaco reservations and permanently deactivated the card. Don't contact me again." My phone literally exploded within minutes. Calls from my mom, my dad, even Emily. I didn't answer any of them. The text messages were a mix of hysteria and threats. My mom, "Sarah, what did you do? How could you ruin this?" My dad, "Call us immediately, this is unacceptable, you're going to fix this. Now." Emily, "You're a psycho bitch. How dare you sabotage my engagement?" I blocked their numbers. I blocked their social media. I blocked everything. Grace called me 2 days later, because apparently my parents had contacted her trying to reach me. And she told me they'd gone to the bakery, crying and saying I'd had a mental breakdown and ruined Emily's engagement trip. Grace told them she wasn't going to get involved in family drama and basically to leave. Then she asked me what had really happened, and I told her everything. The whole history of favoritism, the $52,000 I'd paid, the Monaco trip they excluded me from, but that I was financing. Grace just said, "Sarah, you should have done this years ago. Those people are toxic." What I didn't know was that when I canceled all the trip reservations, I basically created a disaster not just for my family but also for Tyler's family. Turns out Tyler's parents had planned their own trip to Monaco at the same time. They'd made specific work arrangements to be able to go, and when suddenly all my family's reservations were canceled without notice, there was a lot of confusion. Tyler's family started investigating what had happened and discovered my parents had basically been lying to them about their financial situation. Apparently, my parents had told Tyler's parents they were pretty well off and that they were paying for the entire Monaco trip as a gift for the couple. Tyler's family was genuinely wealthy, like successful business people with real money, and they'd been impressed with my parents' supposed generosity. When they discovered that actually the entire trip was being financed with money from a daughter they hadn't even invited, and that moreover, this daughter had basically been supporting the family for a year and a half, they were horrified. I found out about all this because Tyler contacted me through LinkedIn a month later. He sent me a long message apologizing for the situation, told me he didn't know anything about how they'd treated me or about the money situation. He explained that when his parents discovered the truth, they had a serious conversation with him about Emily and the family he was going to marry into. He told me he'd been seeing red flags in his relationship with Emily for months, how she was super materialistic and had ridiculous expectations about the lifestyle they were going to have. But he'd ignored it because he was in love. But after the Monaco disaster and seeing how my family had treated me, he started seeing Emily differently. Tyler broke off the engagement like 2 months after the Monaco incident. According to what he told me in another message, Emily had expected him to simply pay for another equally luxurious trip, and when he said no, she became hysterical. She told him that if he really loved her, he'd prove his love by spending money on her and her family. That was enough for Tyler. He ended the relationship, and according to him, it was the best decision he could have made. Here's where things get interesting. After months of silence, I decided to do something that was probably petty, but that I felt I needed to do. I wrote my whole story in a long Reddit post, basically everything I just told you. I didn't use real names, but I gave enough details that anyone who knew me would probably recognize me. The post exploded, made it to the front page, had like 50,000 upvotes and thousands of comments. People were outraged on my behalf. They called me a hero, said I'd done the right thing. But then someone from my town saw the post and shared it on local Facebook identifying me. Suddenly, my whole story was public knowledge. People from my high school contacted me saying they'd always noticed how my parents treated Emily better than me. Neighbors commented they were glad I'd finally freed myself. It was pure validation from people who'd witnessed my childhood and knew I wasn't exaggerating or being dramatic. My parents obviously found out. Apparently, they were flooded with messages and calls from people they knew asking them about the story. My mom tried to do damage control by posting something on Facebook about how families have disagreements, and she was hurt that her oldest daughter had decided to air private problems publicly. The comments on her post were brutal. People who'd known her for years basically told her that after reading my story, they weren't surprised I'd cut contact. Last week, literally 5 days ago, there was a knock on my apartment door at 9 at night. I opened without thinking, and there were my parents. My mom had red eyes, she'd clearly been crying, and my dad looked older than I remembered. My mom immediately started with, "Sarah, please, we need to talk. We've been trying to contact you for months." My dad said, "We've done a terrible job as parents. We see that now. Please let us in so we can talk." I felt something like a mix of satisfaction and disgust. I told them, "Now you want to talk? After years of treating me like I was invisible? After excluding me from the trip I was paying for? Now that the whole town knows what you did? And you look bad publicly?" My mom tried to grab my hand and I told her not to touch me. She said, "Sarah, we're your parents. We made mistakes, but we love you." I asked them, "Do you love me or do you love my money?" Because for the first 23 years of my life, I didn't feel any love, just rejection and disappointment. My dad said, "We know we can't change the past, but we want to try to build a relationship with you now." I responded, "A relationship? You don't know anything about me. You don't know what my favorite food is. You don't know what kind of music I like. You don't know what my goals or dreams are. For my whole life, you only saw me as Emily's less important sister or as a source of income. That's not a relationship. That's exploitation." My mom started crying harder and said, "Please, Sarah. Emily is devastated. The wedding was canceled. Tyler left her. She needs her sister." That made me laugh. Honestly. I told them, "Seriously? You're here asking me to support Emily after everything? After years of putting her first in everything, of giving her everything I never had, now that her perfect life fell apart? I'm supposed to feel sorry?" My dad got a little defensive and said, "She's your sister, Sarah. Family is family." I responded, "Family is family until it's not convenient for you, right? When you needed money, I was family. When you were planning Monaco, suddenly, I wasn't family enough to invite." I told them to leave. My mom begged more, said they'd do anything to fix things. I told them there was nothing to fix, because the relationship they want to rebuild never existed in the first place. My dad finally said something like, "Someday you're going to regret this, Sarah. You're going to miss having a family." I told him, "I already have a family. Michael and Rebecca have been more like parents to me in the last 10 years than you in my whole life." I closed the door while my mom was still trying to talk to me. I haven't had contact with them since. I don't feel guilt. I don't feel sadness. I don't really feel anything except maybe relief. Grace called me yesterday and told me my parents went to the bakery again, trying to get Michael and Rebecca to help them contact me. Michael apparently told them if they showed up there again, he'd call the police. Rebecca told my mom she was a disgrace for how they'd treated me, and that they should be grateful I hadn't sued them for the $52,000. I'm 28 years old. I live in a nice apartment in the city. I have a job I love where I'm valued. I have real friends who care about me. And finally, I'm free from a family that never saw me as more than a convenient tool. Emily can live with the consequences of growing up being the center of the universe without learning empathy or responsibility. My parents can live with the knowledge that they lost a daughter because of their own favoritism and greed. And I can move forward knowing I stood up for myself, that I set boundaries, and that I chose my own peace of mind over maintaining a toxic relationship just because we share blood. People ask me if I'll ever forgive them or if I'll try to reconcile. The truth is, I don't know. Maybe in a few years when I've processed everything better, maybe never. But for now, the idea of having them in my life exhausts me just thinking about it. And I think that's enough of an answer.